All right, welcome to part 7 of Excel Project 3. So this is where we're going to talk about the preferred return and the mechanics of paying and or calculating the pref. So I'll just go ahead and say what I'm going to say. This might be one of the two hardest Excel programming things in this entire class. Might be the hardest, might be the second hardest, depending on where you sit. This is all logic. Now you're going to ask a spreadsheet to do some dynamic programming, right? Or be able to handle dynamic situations. So let's talk about what a preferred rate of return is, right? There's not really a lot of secrets in the sense that a preferred is essentially it's almost like an interest rate, like a minimum interest rate that you need to earn. It's not really interest. It's not from a debt, so it's not like it could default. Like there's no if the property can't pay it, it's just payment to the partners, which we, the sponsor, is 10%. It's not like if this doesn't pay, there's like a default or a bankruptcy foreclosure at risk. But in order to make it a true pref, you must essentially true up the pref in the sense that if you can't pay all 7%, which this can be very common, frankly, especially in a value add deal where the cash flows are too low early on. I can mess around with the spreadsheet in a million dynamic ways to try to show you what I'm gonna do, but I'm really just gonna try. So I just want to keep it on this one sheet, just gonna mess with the pref and get it up to just really high levels. In this case, I'll do it 11%. So let me put it back to my base case of 7, right? So I'm gonna walk you through what happens. Now, look, there's gotta be some challenge in this class. This is part of it. There's a bunch of if statements here. There's two varieties of statements. There's some that basically decide if a calculation has to occur, and if so, does the calculation. If not, it puts a zero in where you can kind of see these things zero out. It tends to take a lot to figure out where's what. There's others ones that will do the essentially the gambit of select the higher or the lower number, whatever you need, essentially, right? So if you remember in the other spreadsheets, I taught you both methods. I was not really kidding when I said the other spreadsheets have all the little gimmicks and tools needed to do this. This is a bit of accounting. I feel like accounting people must love this. It's got the word accrual. It's all kinds of math going on. So the required preferred return, it's really simple. It's the total equity investment times whatever rate we set. By the way, from a negotiating standpoint, the higher the pref is totally goes against the interest of the sponsor and for the benefit of the limited partner. And this is a great thing. Limited partners love these things. So obviously 7 times 8 million and 66 is 564 and so through. I do want to show you a little modeling convention. This is an important thing. If you screw this up, you'll have trouble. But in the final year, when you dispose of it, you actually add back the total equity investment. So you see it adds back in D14 there. Adding back in the total equity preferred is kind of a required step to pay this off. Now, the first step that this essentially is kind of, I want you to imagine it's almost like a flow chart, almost like a computer program, right? So this is what's required to be paid. Step one, preferred return paid. So now at this point, you need Excel to ask a question. Say, hey, cash flow, is there enough of you to fully pay the pref? In which case, this says basically, I'm giving you a whole bunch of hints here. What's larger, 815,000 or 564? Well, Excel's pretty good at math on this one. Well, 564. So it's going to pay the entire pref or pay that pref. If it couldn't, right, pay it off, then it would tell you how much wasn't paid. We'll talk about the accrual carryover in a second because nothing really happens in the first year anyway. And then it just for fun of the calculation tells you how much sort of excess cash is there. Then if there is excess, let's pay it. And then if there's an accrual balance, meaning that like you couldn't pay it all off this year, it calculates that. Now, here's the thing is this is compound interest, meaning that if you can't pay the full pref, you got to pay in 7% on what you can't pay, right? So it compounds. I mean, it compounds in your favor in that you own 10%, but it compounds against you for the promote because it robs more cash flows away. So at 7%, well, you're always above, so there's no action. That basically you just pay it every year, and how boring that is, right? And there's this total preferred payment. By the way, this little IR, that's just the IR calculator. A little hint: if your pref line says equals IRR of 7%, that means you appropriately paid out the pref. No other way to say it. All right, so what happens if we were to increase this? I should do this for showing you. Wow, all of a sudden I put it to 11%, and the numbers go all over the place. In fact, let's even make it more so. All right. Okay. there's limitations. I don't really have like too many kill switches in this model, so it's not maybe built with as many safety whistles. Like by kill switch means if something should go negative, that doesn't go negative. Don't have a lot of things embedded. So what's going on here? You notice all these numbers are changing. Well, so what happens is now you owe, or the pref should get 967, but there's only 815. Oh, well, first thing is how much can be paid? 815, right? Right, so it's going to pay that. That's all that you're going to see down here. Now it's going to calculate the deficit because, hey, look, we didn't pay it all. How much didn't we pay? We didn't pay 152. Again, there's only 152 here, so the accrual is the same number. There's nothing excess to pay, so we can't pay off any of the excess we don't owe. We owe 152. Next year comes around. How much do we now have to again pay 967? Now this time 910. Once again can't pay the 910. So we're gonna. We can't pay the 967. So we're gonna pay the 910. Now we have from that year we have a $57,000 unpaid balance. Preferred care accrual. I will show you this one. It is the 152 being increased by in this case now 12%. Essentially, it's for your compound interest. Well, there's no excess funds to pay it, so nothing can be paid. So now we just are essentially adding those items there, right? So we are adding the deficit from this current year deficit to the last year deficit that's been grown. Shift us to year 3. Cash flow is now increased to 1,008,000. Prior return is 967. We can pay it all, right? So we pay it, so that means we pay what's there. We have at this point no deficit left over. Now we got to grow our 227 again to 12%. You can see how this thing starts getting against you. And in that case, right, you now owe 255. So the question is, how much is left over? Well, there's an extra 40,000, right? That's the difference between the 1,008,000 and the 967. Left an extra 40,000 left to pay. So what do? Well, you pay the 40,000, right? And then essentially it reduces the accrual balance back down to 214. So it's kind of like you're paying off. You can think of it like a debt. It's not really debt. And of course, total preferred payment is now 1,008,000. Year 4, kind of same thing. We do the same gamut here. We pay it off. Now we owe 240 because again it grew at 12% overnight. How much funds left to pay the accrual? 142. Again, we're going to pay it all towards it. We've got that balance on 97,000. Final year, year 5, and all the numbers blow up. Now, of course, we got 14 million because we sold the thing. That's got the proceeds in it plus the annual cash flow for the year. The required return for now it is the 97 plus the 8 million, so now it's a 9 million thing. Thank God 14 is bigger than 9. By the way, if it were to like break down here, you essentially are not going to break the pref. You really don't even need this spreadsheet. You wouldn't include it in the deal. So that's kind of why there's not really a kill switch. You really wouldn't do the deals. Kind of the answer. Now you have a preferred carrier accrual of 109, right? Because the 97,000, 12 up by 12. How much funds is left to pay it? Well, there's 5,029,000. That's great because we only need to pay how much? 109. In which case now we add what's needed plus the back payment. We stick it down on this line and pa-ha, that is the pref. And now if I do this IRR, let me look at it. 12%, that's what's required. Great. Now, that's not what I really want to happen. So let's just reset it to 7 for the rest of the example. But you got to go through and figure out this. If statements, if statements, if statements. What do you do? How do you solve this? Trial and error. You just sit there until you figure out what it does. And then you mess around with this and just do all kinds of different examples. Doesn't really matter. Just make it do crazy stuff until you break it or fix it. This is how you solve it. This is how you're solving problems, which is what everyone's going to expect who hires you as an MBA graduate to be able to do. So I will leave it to you to solve the problem. That's part of the challenge of this thing. I don't want to completely show you all of the, I don't really want to completely do all this in front of you for now, because I think that's part of the fun of this. And frankly, you'll feel really good about yourself when you figure out, and let me give you a hint, it's actually not that hard, and you know all the tools have been explained in on the prior spreadsheets. All right, that is essentially how you handle the pref and the mechanics of the pref.